And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call as today the Indiana Hoosiers sprint through their victory lap, beating the Maryland Terrapins 80-62 at home to secure a 15-3 record. As we know, the outright Big Ten championship was already secured, but the Hoosiers made sure that they ended this incredible regular season on a high note, that they sent Jackson Tharp, Ryan Burton, Max Bielfeldt, Nick Zeissloft, and Yogi Ferrell out in style, that they got another big win before it comes time for the NCAA tournament. It was, in so many respects, a perfect day of IU basketball, a day that culminated a perfect season at home, and we're going to talk about all of it, including the senior speeches, on this very celebratory, very excited episode of the Assembly Call after today's IU victory. I am your host, Jared Morris. We have a full crew tonight as Andy Bottoms is here, Ryan Phillips is here, and Will DeWitt is here, and we are excited to talk about this game, talk about what it means, and look ahead to what certainly looks like it's going to be a fun March with this Indiana team. But let's begin, as we always do, with our banner moment. And on a night like tonight, there are so many great choices for a banner moment. But I want to go back to the game, and I know it's a little bit hard. These post-game shows where we do it, a half hour after the game, after senior night, that can be a little bit difficult. So we got to get back in game mode. But to me, there were so many impressive moments about today's game. I thought at the start, Maryland really came out and played well to begin the game, and the Hoosiers were a little out of sync, but they got it going again. And then in the second half, I thought every single time Maryland would go on a little run and they'd score 4 or 5 points in a row and get it down to 9 or get it down to 10 or get it to 11, Indiana would push it right back. And they never let Maryland get any closer than 9. And that's such a big difference between this team and teams in years past, that mental and physical toughness to make a shot, have a good possession, get a stop, get a rebound, whatever it takes to not let that other team get back in the game, this team has been really good at doing. And I thought there was one moment, it was late in the game, I think it was after the 4-minute timeout, the under 4-minute timeout, and Maryland went on a really quick 5-0 run, and they got it back to 10. And it was their last gasp. And if they were going to do anything, it was going to come right here at this point. And I wrote on my notes, what do we do? Because, if Maryland then gets another bucket and they get it to 8-6, this game starts getting a lot closer than any of us like, kind of like that Purdue game. So what do the Hoosiers do? They come down on the next possession and they force a shot clock violation. And that's so big because, to me, what separates this team and a team like last year's team, where the offenses are both really good, is this team can go get stops when they need them. This team can get a shutout. They can string 2 or 3 shutouts together in a row when they need it to secure a victory. And that, more than anything else, gives me faith that the Hoosiers can go into to a neutral site in the Big Ten tournament, in the NCAA tournament, and keep winning as they have been here late in the season. It was a big moment, and again, the Hoosiers were doing it all second half. But that, more than anything else, has been the difference in this team from the non-conference schedule to the conference schedule. It's the biggest reason why Indiana went 15-3 and won an outright Big Ten title. And it's the biggest reason why when Nick Zeissloft says at the end of his senior speech, hey, April 4th, we'll see what happens, doesn't seem that outlandish to me, because this team has what it takes to get to that point, and it's because it starts on defense. And I loved seeing that, and it was a huge moment for me in today's game. All right, let's go around the horn, get everybody's opening thoughts. Andy, we will start with you, your bottoms line on this IU victory.
Man, went to me first. I tweeted this out toward the end of the game that this just felt like the perfect cap to the way that this Big Ten season has gone because so many guys contributed. So as I kind of scrolled through the box score, 8 guys have at least 4 points. 8 guys have at least 1 rebound. 6 guys have at least 1 assist. 8 guys have at least 1 steal. And I think 6 guys hit 3-pointers. And it just really has become, Yogi's the headliner, and everybody knows that. He played well again today and ended his Assembly Hall career in style. But what has become a staple of this team is just everybody contributing. You talked about it in the first half. As soon as OG and Juwan came in, the defensive intensity is ratcheted up, and it really stunted the Maryland run at that point. You had all those guys just making key plays. Juwan Morgan played huge minutes, shoulder in a harness, diving on the floor for loose balls, and doing all the little things. Defensively, I thought guys really stepped up and played so much better as the game went on. Yeah, I think you had to expect a little bit of a shot from Maryland at the beginning, but they withstood that blow, stayed around, and then once they took the lead, they really never looked back. And just the things that we've seen during this run, during this conference run, during this late season run, I thought every single one of them was on display, not the least of which was under control Troy Williams, who, even though he came out at the beginning of the game and seemed, a lot of people talked about he was being too aggressive. Some of the shots weren't great, but he sensed that he had a mismatch with Robert Carter, and he was hell-bent on taking advantage of it, and you saw the same thing at the beginning of the second half. He tried to isolate himself against him, knew he had the advantage, and took it smartly. Making plays. Another run that got stopped is when he had a run out after a made basket and got a dunk. So he just seemed to have a real good sense of things and tied a career high, I believe, with 23 points in the game. So I think I'm rambling, so I'm going to probably hit anything anybody else wanted to talk about. But as you start to kind of switch back from the reflective mode of the senior speeches and move back into the game, you kind of get flooded back with all the great moments in this one. And again, I thought it was just a culmination of what these guys have put together during Big Ten play.
I agree. And Andy, there was a quote Bill Raftery had at the end of the game where he said, "This Indiana team doesn't have a buzzsaw of talent, but they are a team of magnificent contributors." And I thought he worded that so well, and it was summed up in just how Indiana won this game and how they've won so many games this season. Ryan, your rant.
I'm not going to talk about today's game because I think that there's just too much going on with this team to really focus on today's game. This was what we've seen from this team over the last 5 games. They took the lead, pretty much owned it for the entire game. As you said, Maryland got within 10 a few times, but it never really felt like Indiana was going to lose this game. Hyperbole gets tossed around a lot, and as a sports, in sports, and as a sports writer, I'm certainly guilty of that a little bit. But players become warriors, games are battles, people who make a game-winning shot are heroes. So I tend to find that ridiculous. But what this Indiana team has done this year, I can unequivocally say is unfreaking believable. It really is. I mean, to come from where they are and where they were and be where they are it's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. 15 Big Ten wins and winning the conference by 2 games. That'd be great any year. I mean, that'd be like a historical season for Indiana basketball. When you consider where they came from, losing to Wake Forest and UNLV and Maui, and then losing so badly to Duke with the worst defensive performance in about 5 years in major conference basketball, and now they're Big Ten champs, win the conference by 2 games, win 15 games, go undefeated at home, have this insane balance on the roster, offensively and defensively. I mean, these kids and those coaches deserve so much credit, and I was tweeting it out all day. I really hope people understand how special this is and how special this season is, because a lot of times, you don't realize how great something is when you're in the middle of it, and then you look back on it and you say, oh, man, that was great. But this is special, and what these kids have done and what they've built is very special, and it's something that as a fan I have loved watching. I've loved coming on here and talking about after every game. It's just been amazing to see this team coalesce and develop and become a unit, and you just see guys unselfishly giving the ball up to get other guys points. I mean, you saw it today. There were some just amazing passes when guys had a chance to fire up a shot or go into the lane and maybe try and draw a foul. No, they were looking for other people and to get everybody else involved and to help people get theirs. And that's something we haven't seen the last 2 years, and we did see on that 2013 team. But there's a difference between this team and that team, and that's this team continues to get better, and this team has depth, and this team has people who can come in and fill other roles. Whereas that was that team was a one with a very shallow bench. This is different. This is special, and this team has more conference wins than the team in 2013 did. I think the most since 1992, which is, in case you're not aware, that's a long time. So this is a special group, and those senior speeches hit home even more because of that. And they're not done yet. They're certainly not done yet. But one thing I want to point out is that loss at Michigan State in East Lansing, 88-69. They got absolutely blown off the floor. Again, that score makes it sound a lot closer than it was. Michigan State was absolutely the better team by far. And that's a loss that a team like Indiana, with a lot of young players and kind of some guys who've been through some bad times and maybe start questioning what they're doing, could have taken 3 or 4 games to get over that. There could have been a hangover. Not this team. They've won 5 in a row since then, winning at home against Purdue, at Iowa, and at home against Maryland. Dominated Nebraska, blew out Illinois on the road. This team has guts, and it has shown that over the last 5 games, and I'm just excited to see what happens for the rest of the season.
Yeah, very well said, Ryan. Will, your stat of the day.
All right, yeah, stat of the day. That's strange. Usually it's stat of the night. So, so going off, I mean, obviously this is a very special game, so we should probably talk about a very special player for this stat of the game. So I want to go ahead and talk about Yogi. Last game I talked about how he was the second player ever in Big Ten history with 1,800 points, 600 assists, and 400 rebounds. Well, today he eclipsed 1,900 points, which now makes him the only player in Big Ten history to have 1,900 points, 600 assists, and 400 rebounds. So obviously a huge legacy boost for him, as that just puts him on the very tip top of any player that's ever played in the Big Ten. And I don't know, like we've talked about before, if he doesn't win the Big Ten Player of the Year, I don't know, that's kind of a shame in my book. But that's going to be my stat of the game.
Very nice. No, it's great. And Yogi goes out. I still can't believe we just watched his last game at Assembly Hall. I mean, he's been just such a big part of IU basketball for the last 4 years, but he went out on top, 17 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, got some payback with Maryland for those games last year, the game at Maryland, the Big Ten tournament game. They were such great games, but we came up short. And today Yogi made sure. I mean, what was great about Yogi is he was hustling down to the final buzzer. I mean, that play that he made, running and forcing that tie-up, diving on the ground for that pass, it was just great, and it was just indicative of the kind of leadership by example that we've seen from Yogi this year, which has just been phenomenal. All right, folks. Well, before we move on to our next section of the show, I do want to let you know that if you are going to the Big Ten tournament this next week, and you should be, the Hoosiers are the #1 seed. I've never felt more confident going into the Big Ten tournament. Knock on wood. But if you're going, use SeatGeek to get your tickets. Go to SeatGeek.com, download the SeatGeek app, because that's the best place for you to get tickets. Indiana plays. They are the #1 seed. They play the Friday game at noon Eastern time. I believe they play the winner of Northwestern and Michigan. Someone can correct me if that's not wrong, or if that's not right. If they win that game, they would then play on Saturday at 1 Eastern time. If they win that game, they play Sunday at 3 o'clock Eastern time. Again, if you're going to get tickets, go to SeatGeek.com, get the SeatGeek app. It's great for seeing the value of the seats that you're going to get, seeing the price right up front that you're going to pay. And Heather reminded me of this. When you go to SeatGeek, because we use SeatGeek when we bought Will's tickets for the IU Minnesota game, when you go there, they actually show you like right where your seat is. It's not just the row, but they actually show you the seat number. And you can see, like, is that in the middle? Is it over here on the side? And some of the sites don't do that. And that's really, really helpful, so you actually see exactly where you're going to be sitting. If you want an aisle seat, then you can get an aisle seat. If you want to be in the middle, whatever. But you can actually see, and that's very helpful. But more than anything, they're going to get you the best deal and let you know what the value of that is. And if you do that, go there and use the promo code when you sign up, Assembly, ASSEMBLY. And that way, when you buy your tickets the first time, you'll get a $20 rebate after you make the purchase. So go to SeatGeek.com. There's a button up at the top that says, how did you hear about us? Click there, add the promo code Assembly, or download the free SeatGeek app. Use it to buy your tickets to the Big Ten tournament. And then once we find out where Indiana will be seated, and we'll talk with Andy about that here in a little bit, you can use it to buy your tickets to the NCAA tournament as well. Again, the free SeatGeek app or SeatGeek.com. All right, everybody. Well, you are listening to or watching the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm your host, Jared Morris, here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, Will DeWitt. We are breaking down Indiana's 80-62 victory over Maryland. And Andy, I want to go to you first, and I want to talk about Troy Williams, because I think of all the storylines here at the end of the year that are really huge for Indiana, the emergence of Troy Williams has been one of the most important ones, and our good friend Chronic Hoosier has his graphic where he flips the switch between bad Troy and good Troy, and I believe he updated his graphic today with the switch up that said great Troy, because what Troy Williams did at the start of the second half was terrific. I mean, he carried Indiana on his back at the start of the second half. It was kind of reminiscent, actually, of what he did in the Notre Dame game, where he came out and the rest of the team was struggling a little bit, and he just absolutely put the team on his back. As you mentioned, he had 23 points, 5 boards, a couple of turnovers, but it continued his stellar play. And no player, Ryan mentioned how Indiana bounced back from that Michigan State game. No player has bounced back more than Troy Williams. He was awful in that game, and he has played at a first-team All-Big Ten level since, and it's helped compensate for the loss of Robert Johnson. But it's just, we've known that this puts Indiana at a different level, and if he can keep playing at this level, and look, he had a good game at Iowa too. It hasn't just been at home. He totally changes the dynamic and the ceiling for this team. What's been the most impressive thing to you about Troy, and how much does he change what you believe Indiana's capable of in these tournaments coming up if he plays like this?
It's just amazing to watch his play down the stretch. So just to kind of give a statistical view on this. So after that Michigan State game, he's been on Pomeroy. It does kind of like calculates based on offensive rating, contribution to the game. It calculates an MVP of each game. So in the 5 games since then, he's been the MVP the 3 times, including today. He has had an offensive rating in those games of at least 115 in each game, which if you go back before that, he'd done really only twice since the calendar turned to January. Once in the blowout over Ohio State and once in the blowout over Illinois. And I mean, again, to kind of put that in context, if he was named named whatever you want to say, the MVP in 2 games prior to that, and now it's 3 of the last 5, has really been efficient. The 2-point shooting, 7 of 7, 5 of 7, 1 for 2, 5 of 8, 6 of 11, and he's hit at least 1 3 in each of those 5 games. Go figure. But he just, he seems to be finding the right balance. We talked so much earlier in the season about he needs to have the ball in his hands less, and I still think less is more in that case with him sometimes, but he seems to be finding a good balance between having the ball in his hands and being aggressive, playing off the ball, and just making those effort plays, running the floor after that made basket. Some of these tip-ins and rebounds he's made, even a couple today, a couple blocks where just kind of comes out of nowhere. There was a big block, I think, around that sequence that you talked about, where he came from the weak side, blocked a shot, and kept the ball in bounds and led to a basket on the other end. And I just think he's continuing to play better defensively, which I think more than anything is what we have we've wondered about. And is he going to get it? Even if he just does okay, then that's good enough. And those kinds of conversations. And he's just playing at a better level right now defensively. He really seems locked in. The communication's different. Guarded a number of different positions today. And when the IU went to that big lineup where they essentially had no guards on the court, he did a really good job of communicating and switching on guys and really allowed that team that was on the floor at the time to switch everything out top, and he did a good job of containing those guys. So he's never going to be an elite defender, but he's working his way into the good defender conversation at this point, just taking more pride in that end of the floor. And the turnover numbers have come down. I just think whatever the reason, the switch seemed to come on. We talk about the switch between good Troy and bad Troy. I think some other switch inside him might have taken it, and certainly a big thing for IU, because when he plays like this, they're that much more fun to watch and that much more dangerous.
Yeah, no, they really are. And the other guy who's really been huge in helping Indiana overcome the loss of Robert Johnson is Nick Zeissloft, who has stepped into the starting lineup. And let's remember, Robert Johnson, I think, had been in double digits 5 out of the 6 games before he got hurt. He had really become a consistent scorer. We know that he's consistently, second to Yogi in assists, was getting rebounds, and of course playing really good defense. And I think we feared with Nick Zeissloft stepping in, he'd make some threes, but what would we lose on defense? And you're never going to be, Nick Zeissloft is never going to be as good as Robert Johnson defensively. But this was another game where I thought Zeissloft really did a good job on both ends of the floor. And in fact, I thought he was weaker today on offense because I thought he forced a couple of those 3-pointers, did make a couple of them, had 9 points, had a couple of assists. So he continued to be a consistent scorer. Prior to entering the starting lineup, his scoring had been a bit up and down, but he's been much more consistent since Robert Johnson got hurt, and his defense has been better. Your thoughts on Nick today, Ryan?
Yeah, I thought defensively he was fantastic, and you've kind of seen that the last couple games. He's a lot more active. He's moving his feet better, going side to side. As Will pointed out in our chat, Zeissloft had a 3 with about 9 minutes left when Maryland was pressing and sort of starting a comeback that was enormous today, and that really It was sort of like putting the hand out and saying, okay, we're stopping right here. This is stopping. And he also had one of the greatest assists in Indiana history with that that throwing it over his head about 3/4 of the way down the court for Juwan Morgan. But I think that Nick is a guy who has really embraced the has embraced the role he's had at every point during his IU career and just sort of gone with it. And he's been a starter since Robert Johnson went out, and we were worried about what we would lose defensively. Now look, as you said, he's not going to be Robert Johnson defensively, but he was active. He was moving his feet. He was working hard on switches. You could tell he really wanted this one today. And against Iowa, I felt the same thing. I thought he was really moving well and not getting beat, because he's a guy that teams used to be able to target. And I think the same with Troy Williams. Teams used to target those guys, and now they try, and it's not as successful. So I think that both of those guys have sort of bought into the defensive mindset and have really developed their games there. We know what they can do offensively when they're going well. When Zeissloft's hitting shots, when Troy's not turning the ball over, those guys are huge offensively for this team, especially as guys outside of Yogi and Thomas Bryant and who can make things happen and really help spread the floor, change the team. But I also think that when they're into it defensively, you're going to get a different Indiana look, and it's a team that can really make consistent stops. I mean, Zeissloft played 33 minutes today. I don't think we've ever seen that in his career. If we have, I'd be shocked. So 33 minutes, and you didn't lose anything with him on the floor either way, on either end. So really valuable, and it's also valuable for when Robert Johnson comes back. If somebody gets into foul trouble, you can rely on him to help you get stops. So I all credit to Nick. He's been playing really well and has really embraced taking over for Robert Johnson, and I'm sure he'll embrace going back to the bench when Johnson's healthy, and he'll come out and continue to try and help this team win.
He also gave one of the great senior speeches in recent memory today, too, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And as for Robert Johnson, he didn't play today, obviously didn't dress, but he was without the walking boot. You kind of hang around during pregame warm-up. So, we don't know when he'll be back, but from everything I'm hearing, it sounds like he should be ready for the Big Ten tournament. We'll have to wait and see, but I think seeing him without the walking boot today for the first time was a good sign. So, Will, let's talk numbers real quick. The one number that jumps out to me today is the turnovers, where Indiana's turnover percentage is only 14.8%, which is a huge improvement. And let's remember, Indiana came out and turned it over 4 or 5 times early, and then I think they went 18 minutes without a turnover before turning it over again in the second half. They kept it to just 9. No one had more than 2. It was a huge reason why Indiana was able to be so efficient on offense.
No, exactly. The turnovers, especially early on, were quite frightening. I was really hoping they would obviously fix that, and they did. Like you said, 18-minute stretch without turnovers, which is great. But coming into the game, there's one big test that I saw for this team, and that's going to be Maryland's stout D versus our potent offense. Maryland's defense has came in with a 98.2% efficiency against them, which is 98.2 points per 100 possessions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And then Indiana was coming in with 115 efficiency. So I was wondering, how well is this going to work out? Is it going to be a good defense beating the good offense, or the other way around? Well, I'm glad to say that Indiana's offense was too much for Maryland to handle, as we finished the game with a 131.1 offensive efficiency rating. To put that into some context, if that was the case for every game, that would be good for first in the country by a large amount. So that's great to see. A couple other numbers real quick. IU has obviously the second highest points per possession in the conference with a 1.15, and Maryland had the best points per possession allowed with only a 0.98. Well, again, we passed with flying colors with a 1.25 points per possession today, so that was another obviously good sign. And then coming in, I was very afraid with the blocks. Maryland is first in the conference at getting blocks with a 16.1 block percent. They have 3 players in the conference who are nationally ranked in block percent. And today, Maryland only had 1 block in this game, according to one site. Another site says 0. So maybe a half of a block. I don't know if we can split the difference there, but I thought that was very good by Indiana. I thought the ball movement today was excellent. I think that's why you're not seeing, many blocks in this game. So those are just a couple numbers that I just wanted to point out on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, good numbers, Will. And Indiana now fourth in the country in offensive efficiency, 119.8 points per 100 possessions. And just so you know, that's what that means. I know Will said percent there. He didn't mean to say percent. It's points per 100 possessions, and then you can also break that down to point per possession. It would be 1.198. And you'll sometimes hear us refer to each one of those, but they're really saying the same thing. And so Indiana fourth now, and on defense, Indiana up to 69th in the country. And look, we said before the season, if this team could just be, average on defense, get it into the 70s, the 80s, they could really do some special things. Well, 69th in the country, and the unadjusted points per possession in Big Ten play, 1.003, that's fourth in the conference. So Indiana has made big strides defensively. And let's talk about that real quick. Andy, let's jump to a different topic than what we were talking about in the chat. Let's talk about the freshmen. Because I think when you look at why is this team so much better defensively? Well, clearly Yogi becoming a more consistent defender has been a big part of that. It sounds like the impact of Rob Judson has been really important from a defensive perspective from Yogi's senior speeches, and I think a guy like Max Bielfeldt coming in and really anchoring down low, playing solid defense has been important. But the two guys that to me have been so huge are Juwan Morgan and OG Anunoby, and it's like today, Maryland looked pretty good offensively early on. They had 18 points before the first TV timeout. And granted, it took a little while for the first TV timeout to get here. But after that, Maryland scored 0, 4, 3, 3 between TV timeouts for the rest of the first half. And a big reason for that is you saw a lot of Juwan Morgan, a lot of OG Anunoby in there. They're active, they're smart, and Morgan is just so tough. I mean, now look, he hurt his shoulder again at the end of the game. We don't know the extent of that injury, but his ability to guard on the perimeter and then go down low and execute a perfect box out against one of Maryland's behemoths down low just shows his versatility and his maturity for a freshman. And I don't think we can overstate the impact that those two freshmen especially have had on this team defensively.
Yeah, it really, I talked about that big lineup earlier. Their ability to guard so many different positions, Morgan in particular, I think during the 7-minute stretch that he was in, when he first came in the game, I think he guarded everybody that Maryland had on the floor at some point. He certainly guarded Trimble and Suleiman outside, worked against some of the bigger guys down low, as you said. That blockout was just, textbook blockout, rode the guy out of bounds and was in perfect position to get the rebound. He flew in from on the baseline and grabbed that offensive board and put back earlier on and just made, hustle plays. And we talked about, again, he didn't hurt his shoulder on the play that he dove on the floor. He happened to do one on a deflection of all things. But, I would guess he's got about the same amount of time between this game and the next as he did last week. So he'll probably be back given the toughness we've seen. But he just, I thought, was really set the tone. There was a play that I remarked on that, they set a ball screen. They switched it, and he was on Trimble, and he totally cut him off on the baseline. Didn't let him get to the basket, forced the ball back outside, and ended up, I think Maryland either had a shot clock violation on that possession or they didn't get any kind of good look at all. And earlier in the season, that's the kind of thing where everybody's turning the corner on this team and getting to the rim. And I brought it up when they came in the game. Like, they're just kind of a defensive shot in the arm for these guys, and it feels like they elevate everybody else's play when they're on the court, just with activity level and even just fundamentals. We mentioned this even in the non-conference games where those guys, get in a stance, get down low more than a lot of the other guys that were there, and for whatever the reason, it seems like that's caught on a bit more with the other guys. But I really think that the two of them in particular have really been the spark for this team to improve defensively. They've set a good example, and they've allowed the team to do some different things that they weren't able to do before. So we've talked about Bryant's improved ball screen defense, but IU couldn't switch things as much as they are able to now with the way those guys are playing. That they kept having to try to defend screens a little bit differently, and now they've been able to utilize the versatility of the two of them in particular, and really everybody's elevated themselves, as you said earlier. Ryan Zeissloft has played really well, and Hartman, by the same token, has become a good defender and able to defend multiple positions. So got a good team like that. The athleticism really makes it tough on teams to figure out what to do, and have really shored up a lot of the areas that this team was weak early on.
Yeah, and Crean talked in the pregame about how important from a scouting report perspective it was to just keep the ball in front of us. You're going to have early help. Keep the ball in front of you. Know the personnel. And I thought Hartman especially, there was a great possession where Lehman has the ball out on in the left corner, and he starts kind of dribbling, looks like he's going to juke and try and drive by Hartman, and Hartman just kept him in front of him. Lehman had nowhere to go. He ended up having to force about an 18-foot off-balance jumper, missed it, and then of course Hartman goes down, and that was the play where he got it on the left wing, drove in, and fed Thomas Bryant for the layup. It was a great sequence for Hartman. But yeah, I mean, those guys, between 6'6" and 6'8", they're big, but they're versatile and they're smart defenders. And Ryan, let's talk, a little bit more about OG and Juwan, because I love the differences between them. OG is so quiet, but yet so spectacular. He had one of those offensive rebound putbacks. I swear he scraped his knuckles on the roof of Assembly Hall and then grabbed a rebound on the way down. And it was amazing. And then you've got Morgan, who clearly plays a lot lower to the ground, but he just plays so damn hard. Even with a hurt shoulder, he's diving for balls out of bounds. The Maryland guys are falling on top of him, and he's staying out there. I mean, it's so impressive what those two guys have done from such a young age, because you don't typically see freshmen that mature on that end of the floor at this age.
Yeah, as a guy who was certainly not very mature as a freshman in college, I can say that I can agree with that. No, these two guys have. I think it's fair to say that in the offseason, everybody thought that Indiana needed a culture change, and I think we heard that a lot. And if you'll remember last fall when two players got suspended, Juwan Morgan had just committed to Indiana, and he said, no, I like people said, well, does that give you second thoughts? And he said, no, that makes me want to get there faster because I want to be in there and help, change the culture of that program and help make things better. And you see he and OG just quietly affecting this team in so many ways. They've extended the bench, which, I mean, you can that affects 1,000 things. It gives guys breaks. It also gives, if a guy's having a rough game, you've got someone who can step in. If there's foul trouble, they can step in and you don't lose as much. I mean, it's enormous for a team to have a deeper bench. But they both come in and they've been the ultimate, and it's such coach speak, but they play within themselves. They know what they do well, and they're always solid about it. Have they had bad games? I mean, not really. OG had one game where he didn't shoot particularly well and maybe shot more than he should have and had a rough go a little bit on offense. But other than that, these guys are contributing positive things to the team on and off the floor. And I know the seniors are going to get a lot of the credit for this turnaround and a lot of credit for their leadership, and that's rightfully so. But this freshman class, including Thomas Bryant, including Harrison Nego, have come in and they're just workmanlike. They just work hard. They're all about the team. There's none of this flashy me-first stuff that you need to get rid of when a lot of freshmen come in. The AAU culture does build guys who are top-rated recruits who are all about showing off, and that's breeded through the system. It's not their fault. It's just the way it is coming up. You have to stand out. When you get to college, now you got to fit into a team of a bunch of those guys. And these guys have all come in, and it's not about me. It's about winning. It's about the team. It's about doing the little things. It's about playing defense. It's about rebounding. It's about, hey, if you got an open shot, hit it, but you don't need to force anything. And it's really changed Indiana. I mean, it really has. And this team has sort of taken on the personality of its freshmen over the last couple months, which is weird. It's usually the other way. It takes on the identity of the older guys, but this workmanlike approach of these guys, and certainly Thomas Bryant deserves a lot of credit. He's very much a team-first guy, and Harrison Nego is just a scrapper, and then Juwan Morgan, who's a aggressive fighter. OG Anunoby just does everything well and is going to be one of the great Indiana players of the next couple of years. I think they deserve a lot of credit for this turnaround, and you've seen they started to turn things around when those guys started playing more and took on more of a role on this team, and it's great to see, and it's great for the future of the program as well.
No, it is, and it's been just a great team effort. Again, like Bill Raftery said, a team of magnificent contributors. Because if the seniors weren't setting a good example, then OG and Juwan wouldn't be able to have the impact that they've had. Same with Thomas with his enthusiasm. And if the coaches weren't demanding it and holding guys accountable, which they've done a lot more this year, then none of this would be happening. And so it's really been a complete team effort from coaches all the way down to the freshmen, and that's what has made this season so much fun. Well, I do want to let you all know that we have a new piece of gear available on our site. If you go to assemblycall.com/gear, one of our great loyal listeners, Brenda, you are awesome, Brenda, she requested that we make tote bags with the Assembly Call logo. You ask, and we do. So if you go to assemblycall.com/gear, there are now tote bags with the Assembly Call logo, great for carrying books or a laptop, whatever you want in it. In addition to that, we've got, of course, the Assembly Call coasters made out of limestone. We've got the Assembly Call sweatshirt. Ryan, are you wearing your sweatshirt? No, he's not wearing a sweatshirt, but he's wearing an Indiana sweatshirt, okay, which is cool.
I went old school for senior day. So.
You went old school. It's all good. Assembly Call coffee mug. So we've got this gear with our logo. So many of you have been buying stuff, which is just awesome. And one of the reasons it's so awesome is because it helps support the show. Between like 20 to 30% of the proceeds of those items, depending on the item, go directly to support our show, which has really helped us expand our coverage and do more, like host the chat and do more with our email list. And so we really, really appreciate all of your guys' support, and that's a great way to support the show and get something cool with our logo, which if you look closely at the logo, you'll see that there are a lot of little kind of IU Easter eggs there in that logo. It's a small logo, but there's a lot going on. And so we really appreciate you picking up our gear, and if there's anything else that you want, go to assemblycall.com/gear, see what's there, leave us a comment in the form that's right there, and we will add it to the page. All right, everybody, we are breaking down Indiana's 80-62 victory over Maryland. The Hoosiers go 15-3, the outright Big Ten champions. This is the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Will DeWitt. And we've talked a lot about a lot of players, but let's talk about Yogi and let's talk about Thomas Bryant, the two guys who were kind of the headliners heading into the season. And we haven't really talked about them much yet in this show, but I thought both played really, really well today. And let's start with Thomas so we can save the best for last, Yogi. I thought, it was another solid game from Thomas. 8 points, 8 boards, a couple of assists, didn't force anything. He was 3 for 5. And had a splendid step-back three-pointer off the dribble, which is great. And, it's always interesting a game like this where you get to see him against Diamond Stone, who he's obviously been compared to because they're both freshman big men, two guys along with Ethan Happ that are the leaders for Big Ten Freshman of the Year. And Stone had a solid game, 12 points. He had 4 offensive rebounds, a couple of assists. And yet I think you saw why none of us would trade Thomas Bryant for Diamond Stone, even as good as Diamond Stone is. It's the motor of Thomas Bryant. You kind of see Diamond Stone a little bit up and down throughout the game. Thomas is never up and down. His enthusiasm, and I'll tell you, one underrated difference about this team is the enthusiasm, just the outright physical enthusiasm of Thomas Bryant and Lionel Anderson, which has seemed to have an impact just on the guys on the bench, and I think that stuff is important. But I thought it was another solid effort from Thomas. Ryan, what did you see from Thomas today, kind of in this big matchup against Diamond Stone? Nothing stood out. Again, it was a real team effort, but I thought Thomas did some good things.
Yeah, I thought that the key thing was defensively he really embraced the challenge of guarding Stone. You could see him really get low into his stance and really get sort of face up. And I don't know. I just think that he is a guy who has embraced, hey, I'm supposed to be a big guy on this team. Here's what I'm going to do. And he's not selfish. He doesn't force things. There were a couple times he was standing out at the three-point line. He probably could have taken a three, but he knows that's not our offense. Occasionally that's fine, but that's not what we want to do. So I don't know. I just think that we constantly see different stuff from Thomas. And, he's a guy who, as a freshman, he's going to make mistakes and he's going to not play perfect all the time, which is fine. But I think that consistently, as you said, we see the effort, we see the intensity, we see him, exhorting the crowd, exhorting his teammates, getting everyone involved. And really the most important thing to him is winning, not putting up numbers. And I'm just watching Stone all year. The guy is immensely talented, and he's a classic back to the basket big man. But again, he just, as you said, he doesn't have the effort that Bryant has all the time. And then, you see Bryant when he goes out and Max Bielfeldt comes in, you see Bielfeldt hit a three, and Bryant almost seems as excited as that Bielfeld's hitting a three as he would if he was, scoring. And so you just love to have that on your team. And Bryant's been doing that all year, and it's a big part of this team. And he is, a centerpiece, but he doesn't have to score a ton. As long as he's out there rebounding, playing defense, affecting the game, and just being a classic big man, he doesn't need to score 20 points a game for this team to be good. And I feel like with Stone, he's got to do 15 and 8 if he's really going to make a huge impact for Maryland. And that's the difference between the two. So, again, you're right. I wouldn't trade Thomas Bryant for Diamond Stone ever. And I'm so happy to have Bryant on this team.
No, and speaking of trading guys, Tom Crean said when he was introducing Yogi Ferrell that he wouldn't trade Yogi Ferrell for any player in the country. And I think I know I speak on behalf of everybody on this show, and probably most of you listening, that we wouldn't trade Yogi for anybody either. I think it's been such a joy watching him come in with the high expectations as a freshman, and get thrust into such an important role on a team that was ready to win and really didn't have the patience to deal with some of Yogi's growing pains. And there were growing pains early on. He turned the ball over a lot. He had bad shooting games, and got criticized a lot as a freshman, but still had some big moments. And it wasn't like he didn't belong as a freshman. It wasn't like he shouldn't have been starting, but it wasn't the easiest transition. And we saw the next year, where that team just never seemed to gel, never seemed to come together. And then as a junior, you saw Yogi start to step up more and be that consistent scorer, but just not have enough around him, and certainly not have enough down low to be a complete roster. And now this year, with the addition of Thomas Bryant and other freshmen that are ready to play, and the growth of guys like James Blackman, Blackman before he got hurt, and like Robert Johnson, and like Hartman, and a team that proved it was ready to win, but just needed a leader to carry it, and Yogi became that guy. And I think coming into the season, that was the big thing that was left for his legacy, is could he be that guy that doesn't just score for himself and doesn't just have a big defensive game against a guy like Nick Stauskas like he did as a sophomore when he's really matched up against the best player, but can he bring that effort and that focus defensively consistently? And man, he's done it this year. And he has become not only a great individual player, but a guy who really makes everyone else around him better, which is why I think now, late in his senior season, people are starting to wake up to just how great Yogi Ferrell is, because he's forcing their eyes wide open with how well he's playing. And I thought all of that was on display today. I mean, today was a perfect microcosm of this season and of Yogi's greatness, because someone else even outshined him with Troy scoring the 23 points, having more highlight reel plays. But again, down to the final minute of a game where you're already up by 12, 14 points and Yogi's diving to get a loose ball, and just making plays on offense and defense. It was a terrific game from Yogi, capping what has been a wonderful season. I mean, Andy, when you think about Yogi and just his season and his career, what comes to mind?
It's interesting. I mean, I'll talk briefly about today's game and then probably more at a higher level. I thought, sorry, exactly what you said, that, he really displayed everything today. 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Sorry.
Andy's getting choked up, folks.
No, literally choking, not crying, but actually choking. Hit a pull-up 3, which I think everybody wanted to see. It was fitting that he hit one of those in the game, but really just controlled the game and played 38 minutes, and it seemed like a game where I didn't even know if he would ever come out. And I guess probably goes along with his comment after the game that if he didn't have to leave IU, that he probably wouldn't. But he certainly didn't want to leave the floor today. And I just thought, this was a good display of his all-around game. And I think when you look at his career, it's definitely that evolution from what he was that freshman year, what he was asked to be in his sophomore and junior seasons, and then kind of this year really settling into a role that felt most comfortable for him. And it was somewhat not surprising to hear him say at the end that this was the most fun year he's had, and I think that speaks to some of the things that you just mentioned about Bryant and how this team just seems to enjoy playing with one another and shows that joy. And so the lasting things I'll have from him are the smiles that are when he came out for senior night, when those pictures of him and Troy after I think it was after the Purdue game, the pictures of him after the Iowa game and hitting all those. It was just cool to see this year. I think that it would have been easy for him to, as much, he ended up shouldering the burden for the entire movement over the course of his career, and it would have been easy for him to lose that joy of playing and doing well and all those things. And I just think that this year it was cool to see, the lasting images I'll have of him are those moments of sheer joy that he had, and hearing him talk about this being his most fun season. And I don't think, certainly as IU fans, the season's been great, but as a guy who's given so much to the program, I don't think you can ask for much more for him in a senior season.
No, and I love that quote at the end where he said, "I feel like if I could never leave Indiana, I never would." And it's just the way that he's embraced Indiana, the way that Indiana has embraced him. It's so special to see. Ryan, some thoughts on Yogi?
I tweeted this out earlier, and look, I came to Indiana in 2003. I followed the program before that, obviously, but was not the huge diehard grow up an Indiana fan that some of the other people who follow us closely were, and so I tweeted this out, and I got a lot of, what about Calbert Chaney, what about Damon Bailey, kind of backlash. But since I've been a part of Hoosier Nation, Yogi Ferrell is my favorite Indiana player, and it's not, and it's a great competition with Victor Oladipo. I'd love to see those two go head to head, but it's not about it's not in spite of the struggles during his career. It's because of them that I feel so drawn to Yogi, because he had that extreme high of his freshman year, winning an outright Big Ten title, being on a team with a couple All-Americans and top 4 draft picks and 4 1,000-point scorers. But then he struggled, and for 2 years he was on a team that really struggled, and he was like the one guy who could do anything on those teams consistently. And he struggled, and they struggled, and people questioned his leadership and questioned everything about him. Was he really an elite player? Was he ever going to – how was he even going to go down in IU history? And then this year to come out and not just be good. If they just blown the doors off of people all year, it wouldn't be as special. It's the fact that those questions persisted and just continued, and he was a part of this great turnaround, one of the greatest in program history, maybe the greatest in single-season turnaround in program history. And it was all during his senior year, while he went and broke a ton of records, became the first to do so many things in IU history and Big Ten history. And I think that you have to look at his career and just say, my God, I feel good for that kid. With what he's been through, with what he's dealt with people questioning him constantly. And it's sort of, as the column I wrote last week, it sort of mirrors Tom Crean. I mean, had that extreme high, then struggled, and everybody questioned whether or not he should even be here. And where he'd fit in, and does he belong there? And Yogi certainly, in my mind, has closed his career out as one of the greats in Indiana history. Regular season career, obviously, we've still got time left, but I think he's really closed as one of the greats in IU history, regardless of what happens going forward. I think that we'll all remember him fondly, and I hope he obviously he got loud cheers today, and he's gotten loud cheers all season. I hope that he feels that as well, that we're appreciative of what he's given this university over the last couple of years, and what he's shown this year, that people can overcome all of those questions and all of those doubts. And I just really appreciate what he's done on the floor, and it's been a joy to watch him play for the last few years.
Yeah, Tom Crean said, I think Yogi Ferrell is one of the most underappreciated players that I've ever seen in college basketball, and that he wouldn't trade him for anyone in the country, and I think he makes a great point. All right, so quick question, and I don't want to belabor this, but Andy, I'll go to you with it first. But just about Tom Crean, and we don't have too much time to get into the great job that Tom Crean has done. We've talked about it on a lot of our recent episodes, but just give me your kind of visceral gut reaction when I say this. But I feel like right now there is more confidence, general confidence in Tom Crean among IU fans, and I feel like I feel it, than at any point in his tenure. Even you had the ascendant team of 11-12, you had the Big Ten champion and the number 1 ranked team of 2012-2013, and this team has never reached that height. But I feel like the way Crean has changed and changed some of his coaching philosophies, like not running the guys into the ground so that they're fresh at the end of the season, how he's righted this ship has really, I'm not seeing a lot of the negativity I used to see. I feel at my gut level more confident in what's happening on the bench, and that our team's going to come out and play well. Are you feeling the same thing? I don't want to be prisoner of the moment, but it's just an observation both internally and what I'm seeing externally.
It's funny. I guess probably the best example I could give is in the game today when he had Juwan Morgan essentially playing point guard and those 5 guys in, and I didn't find myself going, what in the hell is going on out there? So I guess if you use that as the barometer, then I guess I'm probably in the same boat as you. We talked about this a little bit after the last game. It just feels like he's consistently pushed the right buttons, and some of the lineup questions that we've had, you're kind of like, let's see how this works. And we saw that at the end of the first half, and that the game on Tuesday at Iowa, and you saw that with that group today did really well, and you can kind of see a little bit more of the strategy behind it. With being able to switch some of those guys, and having all those kind of 4 guys that could switch everything out front and really cause some problems with their length. But it's definitely interesting, and I think I do fall into the camp of feeling a bit more confident. Obviously, you never know what's going to happen in these tournament situations and what's going to be there, but it's hard not to feel confident after a team that was lost 3 of its first 8 games and has only lost 3 of its last 23. It's hard to it's hard not to be, I think, at this point. And so the way this team has turned things around on defense, both from a intensity and just from an X's and O's standpoint, I think has been impressive, and he's got to get credit for that in the same way that he gets credit for other things. And I think, if nothing else, you see the bond that he has with some of these guys, and I think that's probably something that for the most part we haven't questioned a great deal. But the speech after the Iowa game, the speech tonight, and even the end of Zeissloft's speech when he talked about really challenging them about who they they play for Indiana or at Indiana. Some of that stuff can kind of sound hokey, but it means something to these guys. They wouldn't remember something after a game in November if it didn't mean something to them in that scenario. So I do think he gets he gets and deserves a lot of credit for this, and I certainly, if I look at the spectrum of my confidence level in him, is probably at one of its higher points certainly in recent years.
Yeah, that moment you talked about, Indiana was up 60-44, and Crean wanted to give Yogi a break. So the lineup was Troy, OG, Jawan, Colin, and Max. And you're so right. In past seasons, we would have been like, what is going on? And all I could think of was, hey, smart move. You're giving Yogi a break. Go with the defensive lineup. Makes sense. And, heck, Jawan did a nice job bringing the ball up, so it didn't even hurt us. Ryan, your thoughts, just general thoughts on Coach Crean.
I think that first, let me just get this out there. Without a doubt, he's the Big Ten Coach of the Year. I think he's a strong contender for the award nationally. I'm sure there's somebody nationally I'm not thinking of who deserves as much credit as he does. But it really is hard to come up with one with an example. I think that I agree with you guys that he's what he's done has been pretty amazing. And I agree, changing his philosophy, mixing things around, doing different stuff, it's really helped, and it's really helped this team develop on both ends of the floor. I mean, you're seeing a lot of defense turned to offense kind of stuff, but defensively is where this absolutely turned around for this team. And I don't know what it was that he did. Maybe, as I suggested, I'm not going to take credit for it, but maybe he taught them in French or it's, Hey, I said it after this. Actually, I want to say this team turned everything around in the second half of the Notre Dame game. That was when this season turned on its head. They were down 16 to Notre Dame in the second half and came back and won. That's where this all started. And I know we cite that Duke game a lot because of how bad it was. But I mean, people were ready to toss everything out during the second half of that Notre Dame game. Turned it around on its head, and this season has only taken off from there. But, yeah, anytime you get 15 wins in the Big Ten, that's a gigantic achievement. This team absolutely should enjoy it, and Coach Crean should enjoy it as well, because I think that anybody who didn't feel secure with him as the head coach even a few weeks ago, and felt like, cautiously optimistic at best, should really have confidence in him moving forward. And I think that he's really done an excellent job with this group. And we'll get into it after the season about like a contract extension or whatever. I'm sure we'll discuss that in off-season shows. But as for right now, I think that we just need to stay in the moment, and that I have a lot of confidence in him, and I think everybody else here does too.
And I thought Justin Albers made a good point during the game. He said a lot of coaches would like to have a Colin Hartman or a Juwan Morgan or an OG Anunoby on their roster, but a lot of them don't know how to identify that guy, and Crean does. And I think we're seeing that this year. The recruiting has been, Brian's mentioned this in our chat, the recruiting has been a bit up and down, with getting the 5-star guys but not having a lot of depth. And this year it's really coming together where the role players, who are here, really stepping into those roles and being good, consistent contributors, one all the way down through the end of the roster. Heck, Tim Priller today, when he was called on to get in there the final 2 seconds, he was ready. Again, team of magnificent contributors, which is what this crew is. So hat tip to Coach Crean, because he's done a terrific job of weathering some really tough early waters, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in last call when we talk about what Nick Zeissloft said in his senior speech. But just a great job by Crean and the whole team. So we need to talk NCAA tournament. Andy, we got to get some bracket thoughts from you and what this win does, what Indiana can possibly do in the Big Ten tournament. We got to do last call. Real quick before we do that, a reminder, get on our email list. We are almost to 2,000 people on the email list now. So if you've been kind of tracking where we started at and where we're going, this thing has kind of taken on a life of its own, and people are just signing up in huge numbers. So go to assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana, INDIANA, to 44144. If you do that, you'll get a reply message, text back with your email address, and you'll be on the list. We send our post-game emails the morning after every game. We only put that out to our email list, and we send other emails that go out, keeping you updated on important stuff, giving you analysis. So get on that list. It's the best way to connect with the show outside of listening like you are now. And so we want you to take that next step with us. The best way to do it is on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe, or text Indiana to 44144. All right, everybody. Well, we are wrapping up this episode of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. The Hoosiers won 80-62 today over Maryland to complete a 15-3 record. The outright Big Ten champions, as I said at the start of the show, they sprinted through their victory lap. This is actually the first time Indiana has won on senior night since 2002, and it's nice to see the guys get to cut down the nets after a triumphant victory. So we got a couple more topics to discuss here before we close up. Andy, let's talk NCAA tournament, because I think, it was like a week ago that we were talking about how important it was for Indiana to get up to the 4 line. And I feel like with a win like today, even if Indiana were to lose its first game in the Big Ten tournament, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like at least being on the 4 line is a foregone conclusion now. The team is 9th in KenPom, certainly be top 10 in all the polls. So they feel like they're maybe on the 3 line with a chance to get up to a 2 in the Big Ten tournament. But tell me if that's not right.
Yeah, so I really haven't been able to look a ton. I've watched some college basketball this weekend, but my younger daughter turns 5 tomorrow, so we've had a lot of birthday celebrations for her going on. So, but I think they're definitely, like, as I kind of look at where things seem to be shaken out on Friday. They were right in the kind of middle to the end of the 4 range. But if you look at teams in front of them, Duke lost to North Carolina, Maryland obviously lost to IU. So those are a couple results that matter. Miami lost too, but I don't know that pushes them down far enough. So I think at the very least at this point, without kind of going through and looking at things, I think IU's certainly in that 3 conversation. Might really be there by the time it's all said and done. But West Virginia did win at Baylor, Oregon won again, North Carolina won. So those are all results that are in the neighborhood of where IU is. Utah came back late, so you've got a lot of teams right in that range. So they may well be on the 3 range. If not, they're right on the border of a 3 and a 4. So I think when you look at that, I would agree with you. They're going to play Michigan or Northwestern. Obviously, Northwestern would be a worse loss of those 2. Michigan's going to come into the Big Ten tournament desperate for multiple wins at this point after losing last night. So, if it ends up being Michigan, they beat them. I think that pushes them a little bit further up. But I would agree with you at this point. It seems hard to see them dropping below a 4 at this stage. And I kind of stand by what I had said a couple weeks ago with you and Alex on Inside or a podcast on the Brink. A 2 is a possibility, but I think a lot of things have to go right, not the least of which is IU rolling through the Big Ten tournament. But, you've got to leapfrog a lot of teams at this point, and I think it's important to note that, these conference tournaments is only 1 game if you lose. So it's easy to make a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh, this happened in this tournament, it's a huge deal. The committee is considering everything that's happened and led up to that point. So I do think the 3 seems even more realistic than perhaps it did when we talked a couple weeks ago. The 2 still feels like a long shot, but not outside the realm of possibility. And we'll just see what this team can do. But they're certainly in a good position. I don't see them dropping past a 4 at this point, which is something that everybody I think was at least had some concern about, or even if they could get to that point. So the higher up the seed list you push, the better chance you got of playing close to home in the first round. And again, there's not a lot of regional sites that are very close, but anywhere closer to home is better. So, I think they're in a really good spot. You need to take care of business in that first game to avoid anything that even looks like a potentially bad loss, and then see what happens in the semifinals, hopefully.
And as far as your bracketology, and you can get Andy's latest brackets always at assemblycall.com/bracketology, or follow him. And if you're not following Andy on Twitter, you really need to be, especially this time of year, at Andy Bottoms. When are we going to start the daily updates?
I am not sure I will be able to do one tonight, but at the very least, at a minimum, we'll have one up Tuesday morning, first thing, and the daily updates from that point. Best case scenario would be tomorrow, but given this point, the fact that the game started at 4:30 and we're now almost at 9, and I've got other stuff to do for our email and just going to update and some other things. I think tonight feels like a long shot, but we'll kind of work through it from there. We're starting to get some auto bids in and things like that, so we'll work through it there. Certainly at a minimum Tuesday, and then every day going forward from there. Maybe if everything goes well and I burn the midnight oil, maybe we'll get something up tonight.
Hey, and we of course did our pick'em, our Big Ten IU Big Ten pick'em this year. We really appreciate everybody who participated. Will, are you reporting that that we have 3 people tied for first place at the end of Big Ten play?
We do. We have Steve, Trenton, and Summer all tied at 16-1, which is quite impressive, by the way.
That's right, and because we didn't do the Rutgers game for the fan pick, we did it for our individual picks. That's a game that Ryan famously chose wrong on.
I did not. I finished the year 17-1. The only game I got wrong was Penn State. This is a lie that you have perpetuated, Morris.
No.
I blame you.
The last team to go 17-1 was the 92-93 Hoosiers, and you, sir, are not a 92-93 Hoosier. You're 16-2. 16-2 feels much better.
I was not.
All right, so Will, I think what we'll do, because we said that people will get some cool gear, so I think we'll send something to all 3 of the people who won, but I say we do the Big Ten tournament as a tiebreaker. What do you say?
Hey, that sounds pretty good to me.
Okay, so we'll figure that out. Summer, Trenton, and who was the other person? Steve?
Yeah, Steve, who could have won if he didn't pick Iowa last time.
That's right. That's right. Call Steve out. That's right. That's what you get for picking against the Hoosiers. I went 15-3, right? Because I picked Indiana in every game.
That is correct.
There we go. Okay. See, that's what everybody should be, but it's okay. So we will. So we'll figure all that out. But the 3 people who tied, we'll get you all something cool, and then we'll figure out the winner from the Big Ten tournament. With that said, obviously Andy has got some things to do. Ryan needs to go cry about losing that Rutgers game. Will has to go watch the new Bears 30 for 30 on Netflix. So there's lots of things going on here that everybody needs to do. So let's get to last call. I want to linger on this win this season forever. I don't want to close up the show. But we'll get to last call. We know everybody has stuff to do. So let's begin. Let's do last call. Will, you can go first. Last call.
Sure. I mean, what else can I say but what a great day to be a Hoosier, am I right? I mean, after an impressive win against an impressive opponent at home, I'm excited. We're marching at the right time. Big Ten tournament in a week. Excited to be watching that. I wish I could be going in person, but I'll be watching from my couch, resting peacefully after a surgery on that Thursday. But, yeah, what a great game. I'm excited for what's to come. Very sad I'll never see Yogi again in Assembly Hall, but I'm sure we'll see him again when they come back in like 30 years as we celebrate this team.
Absolutely. Ryan, last call.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that people really need to remember how special this team is and put it down among your all-time Hoosier teams that you love, because this team deserved it, absolutely deserved this Big Ten title, earned it. 15-3 is just incredibly impressive. Winning the conference by 2 games, going undefeated at home, especially where they came from to where they are now, and the coaches and the players all deserve credit. And I hope that these guys take a few days to really enjoy this. They've earned that, and then turn their focus to the Big Ten tournament and beyond. But for right now, I think that they really need to celebrate this and celebrate it as a family and a team, and they've earned that. They've certainly earned that this year. And today against Maryland, just more of the same that we've seen from this team over the last few months.
Andy, last call.
It's hard to try to sum up things about this team, but I think a couple things to me stood out as as I was watching Twitter today. They talked about there was a time that Maryland, Suleiman's getting at somebody about not getting him the ball and things like that, and what a contrast that was to IU. And we heard every single guy after the game talk about the family element, the chemistry, the togetherness that these guys have, and I think that's really the only way that they've been able to turn this around. You can point to X's and O's, you can point to a lot of things, but when you look at this team, the whole is truly greater than the sum of the parts, and today was a great way to cap the season in that regard, because you look at who Maryland's starting 5 is, and you think from a talent standpoint, this team should be really good. This team should win the Big Ten, and they didn't, and they feel like they've kind of underwhelmed all year. And IU, on the other hand, seems to have overwhelmed, at least from where they were earlier in the season. And I think that kind of thing really brought them together. It stood out in the comments today. It stood out after the season, and the way that they've pulled out of the tailspin that seemed to be imminent early in the season. And so, I think those are the things that we love about IU basketball: the guys diving on the floor and picking each other up, the unknown guys stepping in and making big plays. And I think this team really embodied a lot of that for all of us, whether we followed the program forever or whether we've followed it more recently. Ryan, as you mentioned, I think that's why it's easy to like this team. That's why as you and Alex talked about on Podcast on the Brink last week, it reminds you a little bit more of that the team in 2012 that beat Kentucky and that team, because it just seemed they played as a unit. They surprised you with the things that they did, and they really just embodied everything about IU basketball that we all love. And I think this team has done a really good job of capturing that. And I think for that reason, to Ryan's point, is why they're going to go down as one that people remember very fondly and love and enjoy talking about. And it just has been a joy to watch these guys. I think we've talked about resiliency as one of the themes of this team this season. I think the other one is fun. At one point in the second half, I just tweeted out that this team is just a lot of fun to watch, and probably if nothing else, again, going back to the joy these guys had on their faces when you didn't think you were going to see that when they walked off the court in Durham, but they did, and they had fun, and I think them starting to have fun, really helped everybody as a fan get involved and really helped these guys get over the hump and go to one of the better Big Ten seasons that I can recall from an IU team.
Yep, very well said, Andy. Well, for my last call, I want to start it out by just a quick shout out to one of the MVPs of Indiana basketball, and we know that the MVP on the floor is Yogi Ferrell. But one of the most valuable people in Indiana basketball is Marnie Mooney, and she's the academic advisor for the team and just does such a great job of making sure that our guys are doing what they're supposed to be as students. I know the term student athlete gets thrown around kind of as a punchline, but Indiana really seems to be a program that buys into that and that takes that seriously, and Marnie is one of the big reasons why. I had the pleasure of talking with her for an episode of Podcast on the Brink I did about Will Sheehy a couple years ago. So nice, so kind. And I know she's dealing with a health situation with her family, and so we just want to send out all of our most positive thoughts and prayers to her. She's such an important part of what Indiana does and what makes this program so special. So all of our most positive thoughts to Marnie. And right along with that is you hear a lot of times with sports teams, they throw around a term like family, when we're family. And I think a lot of times, it feels to me anyway, like it's paying lip service to it. But with this team, we've heard that a lot, and it doesn't feel like lip service at all. It feels genuine. Because sometimes people say that and you hear it in a press conference, but what you see on the floor, the chemistry, the interaction, it doesn't match up with it. And with this team, it really seems to, because I don't know that you could go from 5-3 and where Indiana was early in December and to being down 16, 17 points to Notre Dame in that second half and somehow find the resolve and the togetherness to win those games, and then to come out and do what they did in Big Ten play and to be playing better at the end of the year when the schedule was so tough, when so many people are telling them they can't. But what they've got is their internal fortitude and togetherness and belief. And this team really does seem like a family. And the teams like that are the ones that always seem to do well in the tournament and in postseasons, that you end up looking back and you may not have expected it, but they achieve the most. And this team really seems to have that elusive quality that the great teams have. And that's why I'm so excited about what this team can do in the upcoming tournaments. We'll see what they actually do, but that's one of just the visceral reasons why I have so much confidence. And the other is how much pride these guys seem to take in playing for Indiana. And apparently at one time earlier this season, even their coach questioned that, because Nick Zeissloft relayed a story today during his senior speech where Tom Crean, after the team had played so poorly in Maui, and he said Tom Crean was so mad, and he asked the team, are you guys playing at Indiana or are you playing for Indiana? And I think it was a valid question to ask at that time, because that Indiana team that played in Maui was nothing like the Indiana team that we're seeing now. They didn't have that togetherness. They didn't have that esprit de corps and just the same work ethic and fight on the court that you see now, that ability to get a stop when you need it, when the other team has made a little run on you and you need to get a stop to stem that tide, make sure you win. That team in Maui didn't do that like that team today did. And that is perhaps one of the biggest differences, is that simple question that Tom Crean asked those guys. Are you playing at Indiana? Or are you playing for Indiana? It clearly had a lasting impact for it to end up in Nick's senior speech, and something certainly changed. And that seems to be a big part of what changed, is this team really seemed to start playing for Indiana, for each other, And what we got was a 15-3 Big Ten season, another outright Big Ten title, and now all the confidence in the world in our team heading into the tournament. And as fans, you can't ask for anything more. Ryan said it so well. This season has been such a joy. I hope everybody appreciates what we've seen and what we can still watch. Let's cherish the moments that we have left with this team. It's certainly one of the more fun teams in Indiana basketball history, and now they have a real chance to etch their name even further in Indiana basketball lore by doing something special in the tournament. Either way, they've had a special season, but they can take it to the next level based on what happens over the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm excited to see it. I have a lot of confidence in it, and we will be here to talk about it after every game. Hopefully there are 9 more of these left, 3 in the Big Ten tournament, 6 in the NCAA tournament. We'll be here with a post-game show after every single one. We really appreciate you guys being here, and most of all, we thank the team, and we appreciate the team for making this such a fun season to be doing the show for. Hat tip to you, Hoosiers. Great season. All right, everybody, we will talk to you on Friday. I don't know who will be here since it's a noon game on a Friday, but I will be here.
I requested time off work, so I'm good.
Yes, Andy's good. Ryan, are you going to be here? Raising his hand. Okay, so, and Will, you're having surgery, Will. So that's the last comment. Your surgery's on Thursday, shoulder surgery. We all wish you the best, a quick recovery, and get back on the show whenever you can. We'll be waiting for you. Your spot is always here. All right, everybody, have a great night, have a great day, and we will talk to you on Friday after IU versus Michigan or Northwestern. We'll find out then. See you, everybody.